Well, greetings, vinyl community, and welcome to VC Friday. So here we are, 2 months into the new administration, and the American economy is going straight down the tubes. It's really quite frightening. The stock market is crashing, but I made a killing in the Stockhausen market. How did I do that, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I did that by purchasing this 3 LP box set of Karlheinz Stockhausen's Momente, or Moments. This is a large-scale composition, as you might guess from the fact that it's 3 LPs, that was composed between 1962 and 1969, and it's in a kind of modular form, and that's what the moments are. The moments are the sections or modules that can be shuffled around according to certain rules. It was begun in Italy in 1962, and Stockhausen was invited to stay at this Italian villa to work on his new composition, and he worked alongside the artist Mary Bauermeister. Now, this being January, and this Italian villa not being heated, because it was really meant as a summer residence, so that's why the owner wasn't using it at the time. Well, it was pretty chilly, so Stockhausen and Mary Bauermeister retreated to a smaller room with a piano that could be heated while they worked together. And apparently the room wasn't the only thing that got heated, because Mary Bauermeister eventually became the second Mrs. Stockhausen. The complication being that there was already a first Mrs. Stockhausen at the time, and the first Mrs. Stockhausen was Doris. So the composition has classifications for the different moments. There are K moments, which have certain sonic characteristics, and K stands for Karlheinz. There are D moments, which have certain other contrasting sonic and musical characteristics, and D stands for Doris. And then there are the M moments, and guess what? M stands for Mary. So isn't that cozy? Karlheinz, Doris, and Mary are all woven together in the composition, and in fact, good old Karlheinz was going to have a little ménage à trois, and apparently Doris was open to that, but that didn't work out. So Doris and Karlheinz got divorced. Karlheinz married Mary, and this all happened while Momente was still in progress. So in 1965, which is like halfway between those starting and ending dates I gave you, there was a recording released of the unfinished work, and that came out on the Vario label in Europe and on the Nonesuch label in the USA. And you'll notice that the artwork features the same basic image as on the box set. That's because this is a piece that Mary Bauermeister was working on during this period. This is titled PST, so that is Mary Bauermeister's work. And what we have here is the unfinished work, and this is known as the Donaueschingen performance. On the box set, 5 sides out of the 6 are devoted to a 1972 recording of the complete work, and this is called the Europa version. Side 6 is an abridgment of this version, so we get about half of this on side 6 as a sort of encore or bonus. And the booklet shows us Karlheinz on the front, and on the back, Gloria Davy, who is the soprano soloist in the work. The work is composed for soprano soloist, 4 choirs, and 13 instrumentalists, consisting of 8 brass players, trumpets and trombones, 3 percussionists, and 2 electronic organ players. The percussionists, however, are not the only percussion players in the ensemble, because all of the choral groups play different percussion instruments. They have little handmade strikers and thumpers, and one group has wrenches. They're socket wrenches for Volkswagen lug nuts for the wheels on Volkswagens, and those tended to disappear because all the choir members drove Volkswagens anyway. But the choir is required to make all sorts of different sounds. Besides singing and playing percussion, they do just basically everything you can do vocally. So there's shouting and whispering, as well as singing and making various kinds of onomatopoeic noises. Also, they make body noises, particularly applause. They clap. And there's a connection here to the Beatles, because Paul McCartney, whenever they talk about John having all these experimental songs and say, well, yeah, but Paul was the guy living in London and he was really in touch with the London avant-garde music scene and art scene. And Paul McCartney listened to Stockhausen, presumably this 1965 recording of Momente, and heard the applause being used as part of the music. And that's what gave him the idea of having a crowd reaction as part of the music in the title track of Sgt. Pepper. So that's the Fab Four lore that connects to Stockhausen's Momente. Odd thing about the box is that the spine of it has no writing, so when it's on the shelf you won't be able to tell what this is. I don't particularly like that. All you get is a little Deutsche Grammophon logo at the bottom. And within the booklet we see some of the percussion used. Big gong and I think it's called a kidney drum that's used by the percussionists, as well as some of the instruments used by the choir groups, including the wrench there. And you get to have a good wrenching musical experience with Stockhausen's Momente. And then for something completely different, I picked up 3 great LPs of French traditional folk music translated into the modern as of the 1970s, rock idiom, starting with this compilation, Quintessence, by La Bamboche. This is part of a series of albums that all had matching covers. There's a similar one for Malicorne, which I'll get to. And this is a compilation from La Bamboche's first 3 albums. I don't see a lot of albums by them around, and in fact I've only ever found their first album. I've had this one since way back in the day. This is the first La Bamboche album, and you can see them there playing their assorted folk instruments. That gives you a good idea of what this music is about. All the compositions are traditional songs and instrumentals arranged by the band. And La Bamboche is closely associated with Malicorne, and in fact they appear on this album, which I also picked up at the same time, Almanac, the third album by Malicorne, from 1976. And this is a sort of concept album based on the months of the year. So there are 12 songs, each assigned to a month, and it has this nice bound-in booklet with lyrics, notes, and illustrations for all the pieces. And this was the first Malicorne album not to be titled just Malicorne. Their first couple were Malicorne, and then their fourth was also just Malicorne. They were like Peter Gabriel in that they just didn't bother with titles for the first few. And La Bamboche was the same for their first couple, because their first two albums were just La Bamboche. So those albums are very, very much of a piece, a very similar sound, but Malicorne changed. And this album from 1979 has a drastically different sound, much more prog, much rockier, much more emphasis on the instruments versus the voices. And the band has expanded to a 7-piece from the quartet they were previously. And one of those members is Brian Gulland, formerly of Griffin. And he plays all sorts of instruments. Everybody plays all sorts of instruments on here. Just on the first track alone, percussions and drums, 3 people on vocals, bass and clavinet, electric guitar, second electric guitar, fiddle and cello, and Brian Gulland on synthesizer. There's also a track where Brian Gulland plays 4 crumb horns as well as flute, bassoon, and oboe on an instrumental dance piece. So it's very, very varied in the instrumental color, and the first piece actually has a bit of a funk direction to it. It's one of those pieces, it's a list song like the 12 Days of Christmas, where it's titled The 7 Days of May, and for each day of the week it adds another line to the chorus. So you get that kind of callback to different folk forms. There's the list song. There's another song on here titled Les Transformations, obviously the transformations, and it's one of those songs where you have 2 characters who are talking about changing into different entities, each one of which could either defeat or escape the previous one. And that's something you'll hear in English folk songs. It's something that Kate Bush adapted for the last song on The Dreaming, and it's something you get here. So it's a great assortment of sounds, with the very medieval sounds from the crumb horns and the strange stringed instruments. There's an instrument titled the Épinette des Vosges, which appears on both this and La Bamboche uses it. It's épinette is French for a spinet, but it's not a keyboard. It's basically a dulcimer. It's like a guitar with, or a guitar neck with no body, just a neck with strings, is the Épinette des Vosges. And that's something you'll hear on here, along with rebecks and mandocellos and assorted odd percussion. The viella roux, which is like a hurdy-gurdy. Amazing variety of tone colors. And this is just a fantastic album. They've very much changed from their original, more traditional orientation, but I really dig what they do on here.
Avant il y a du tralala, avant il y a 180 pucelles,
180 pucelles.
Et elle danse terreau, du tralala, elle danse terreau dessus un pont de verre,
Dessus un pont de verre.
Je suis venu vous demander, je suis venu vous demander un petit tour de danse, un petit tour de danse.
So there have been some YouTube videos recently on the very niche topic of show us your records that feature import stickers from Rick Ballard Imports. Rick Ballard in particular imported a lot of titles from ECM, from their German line for the titles that didn't have US distribution. And so you see those little gold stickers on a lot of those German imports. And Rick Ballard has a shop in Oakland, and I visited his shop last week, and I made him aware that he was a topic on YouTube, and he was amused by that. And I picked up some records at his shop that sure enough have that sticker. And a couple of them are on the Moore's Music label. And this is the first album by the World Saxophone Quartet. For some reason they spell quartet with a double T on this release. This was recorded at the 6th International New Jazz Festival in Moors, Germany in 1977. And it's titled Point of No Return. And on the back cover, they helpfully indicate the actual point. This is it. This is the point of no return that you hear so much about. But the World Saxophone Quartet, as you can tell from the line at the top, consists of David Murray on tenor sax, Julius Hemphill and Oliver Lake on alto sax, also some soprano from Oliver Lake, and Hemiet Bluyet on baritone sax. And the centerpiece on here that's not everyone's favorite is Scared Sheetless on side 2, which is a 23-minute piece. Not the only piece on the side, it's a long side, but Scared Sheetless has a theme, and then it goes into a long, unaccompanied solo by each of the 4 saxophone players, playing very free, so that's a little patience testing for some people, from what I've seen in reviews. But great playing throughout, and the pieces where everyone's playing together, I think, are just outstanding. So, Point of No Return, featuring the Rick Ballard import sticker on the Moore's Music label. Also on Moore's Music is this album by Vario 2. And Vario is a band with no fixed composition. It's a collective where people can perform in different configurations and play improvisational music. And on Vario 2, we have Martin Altena on double bass, Günther Christmann on trombone, Paul Lovins on percussion, Maggie Nichols on voice, and John Russell on guitar. And yes, it features the famous and celebrated sticker. And more free improvisation, but this time on the Ring label, which is the precursor to the Moore's Music label. The name just had to be changed because of a conflict with another Ring Records label. This is by the trombonist Paul Rutherford, Old Moore's Almanac. And this consists of 4 lengthy improvisations for unaccompanied trombone. And there he is tromboning. And there's the obligatory sticker. This is very austere because it is unaccompanied trombone, and that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it does go on a bit. But for those whose tastes do include free improvisation, this is a very cool find. Next is an import from France, so no Rick Ballard sticker on this one, but I did pick it up at Rick's shop. Cecil Taylor, Nuits de la Fondation Markt, Volume 1. And I already had Volumes 2 and 3 of this performance, so I was very happy to complete the set with Volume 1. In fact, I did see all 3 volumes in Rick's shop, including 2 copies of this one. So it's all there to be found. Nice gatefold production on the Shandar label. And as is inevitable on a Cecil Taylor album, this is seriously fiery energy music. And it's a quartet with Cecil Taylor obviously on piano, Jimmy Lyons on the alto sax, Sam Rivers on tenor and soprano, and Andrew Cyril on drums. And it's all one piece, the second act of A running over both sides and continuing on from there. And there's not a lot more I can say about Cecil Taylor once I've mentioned the words fire and energy. And finally, another quartet featuring Sam Rivers, in fact, an album by Sam Rivers, his album Waves, which you might have noticed I had up on the background last week. This is from 1979 and features, besides Sam Rivers on saxophones, flute, and piano, Dave Holland on bass and cello, Joe Daly on tuba and baritone horn, and Thurman Barker on drums and percussion. The pieces are built around a concept of nature, so they are titled Shockwave, Torch, Pulse, Flux, and Surge. You know, it's a kind of theme of movement in those titles. When I first put this on, I had to double check because I was going, did I get the right record? It's opens with a long solo for piano. Nope, that's Sam Rivers on piano. It sounds like I'd put on another Cecil Taylor record. But he does eventually transition over to his other instruments. I'm not real crazy about the inclusion of the low brass, the tuba and baritone horn. I don't think it's particularly well recorded, and it kind of muddles up the low end. And the playing sounds more like a counterpoint or an additional bass line much of the time, rather than really soloing or showing the player as an individual, rather than just part of the backing. This is a promo copy with a little stamp there on the Tomato label, and I have never seen this inner sleeve before. The plastic inner sleeve with a tomato on it. And I've got several records on Tomato, but they didn't come with that. So that's very cute. For a sample, I think I'm going to be including a bit of Torch, which has some really great flute playing. That's the flute showcase for this album from Sam Rivers. So there is your VC Friday for mid-March. Thank you very much for watching. Happy St. Patrick's Day to those of the Hibernian persuasion. Be well. I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
Always after me Lucky Charms.